Rhonda Weiss, Mitch's sister.
Hi, I'm Rhonda, Mitchell's sister, and Aunt Rhonda to Ari and Hannah. Hannah was my buddy. She was a sweetheart, always smiling, so kind, so caring, so loving, always looking for the good and the positive in everything. We were very close. We had a lot in common. We formed a special bond when Hannah was just 2.5. And our connection grew stronger with time. I thought that many, many years from now, Hannah would be up here delivering my eulogy. When Hannah was 2.5, I came to Florida to help take care of her. Every day we went to the Safety Harbor playground, read books with Baby Doll, did art projects, went swimming, and played with all her stuffed animals. She was such a delight. We planted her first flower garden together. It was a surprise for her daddy. My brother and I both love plants, and there was an area in their garden that he had not yet planted flowers. So one day, Hannah and I went to the nursery, and she picked out the flowers, and with my help, little Hannah planted her first flower garden. She loved digging in the dirt. She liked putting in all the colorful flowers. She would water them every day, watch them grow. Such joy on her face. Clearly, it stuck with her as she became an organic gardener. She also loved animals. A few days later, we went to see animals at a visiting petting zoo. Holding my hand tightly, she wanted to see the bunnies and the goats. Clearly, she liked goats way back then. Hannah always thrived on making connections. When she first met my late husband, she really took a liking to him. And one day we were all together. She got this curious little look on her face and looked up at me and said, "Aunt Rhonda, how come Uncle John has a ponytail and he's a boy?" And I said, "Well, boys in California can have ponytails." Big smile broke out on her face. She knew her uncle was okay. A few years later, Hannah started to play guitar, another thing that we had in common. I was so happy for her. It brought such joy to me, and my brother knew that, and he was hoping it would bring that to Hannah. Hannah and I played guitar together a few times. I took her to see her first concert, a guitarist, one of my favorites, Leo Kottke. When we got there, I handed a note to one of his crew telling him that this was my niece who was just started to play guitar, and this was her first concert. Well, Leo Kottke didn't get the note till the next day, but he called me and left this really inspirational message for Hannah. It just made her day. So although Hannah enjoyed playing, she really loved listening to music, especially from her brother. She enjoyed listening to him play and sing, and she liked watching him perform. He was quite talented, and Hannah was very, very proud of her brother. Hannah and I texted and talked often. She loved talking to me about gardening. She always asked what I was growing. She had planned to come to California this summer, and we were both looking forward to it. We both loved animals, gardening, music, kindness, and our brothers. Hannah and I had a deep love for our little brothers who towered over us. Me at 5'4", and Mitch at 6'1", Hannah at 5'3", and Ari at 6'3", the same height as my dad. Mitch was my best friend for most of my life, and I told Hannah that from the time that Ari was born. I wanted her and Ari to have what Mitch and I had, And it was clear that Hannah and Ari did. They loved hearing stories about the adventures their dad and I had while growing up. One that really made them laugh was that of our go-kart. Mitch and I made many things together. We were both very mechanically inclined and clever. Mitch would take everything apart, as my sister told you. Sometimes he'd get in trouble. I did not like to get in trouble, so I became very adept at putting things back together. We were a very good team. So there were things that we took apart and put together that my parents never found out about. Sorry about that, Mom. But we got by. So we decided to make this go-kart. Similar to a sled, no engine, just all wood, take it up to the top of the hill, let gravity pull you down, pick it up, go up to the top of the hill again. Well, Mitch didn't want to have a steering bar, he wanted a steering wheel. He wanted it to be more like a car. So we figured out that we could wrap strings around a shaft and get a steering wheel. The only problem was we had no idea how many times to wrap the string around. So some of you may see where this story is going. So we're ready, we go to the top of the neighbor's driveway. Mitch takes the first run, he's coming down the hill, we're grinning so hard, the car works, we're so happy, and he makes a turn to the right to continue going down the street. But the go-kart made a U-turn and crashed into the stone wall that went around our block. Well, the wheel fell off. Mitch was a little dazed and confused for a while. And then when he came to, he was pretty upset at first because the wheel fell off, but then he realized, hey, it was a success. We just kind of need to tweak a few things. So he picked up the pieces, went back home, and fixed up the car. But most of the time we would walk places, not take this little car, and that included walking to school. One year, the winter of 1974, during the gas crisis, when the United States decided to stay on daylight savings time so that it would be lighter out in the evening and people wouldn't have to use as much fuel. But that meant it was really dark in the morning. So our school district decided to start school an hour late, but my parents' school district started on time. That meant they couldn't help get us to school. So for safety, they hired a taxi company to take us to school. My sister was already in junior high, so she wasn't in this taxi with us. Most of the time we knew the drivers and we'd get to school. We were given $2, that covered the fare and the tip. Well, one day we had a totally different driver, and he was not driving toward school. Mitch and I kept looking at one another going, are we going to be kidnapped? What's happening? I asked the driver if he knew where he was going, and he said yes. We're watching the meter. It's ticking away, ticking away. Finally hits $2, and we don't have any more money, and we are nowhere near school. So we get to school, and we don't know what to do. We look at one another, and we realize we've got to run. So we jump out of the taxi, I throw the money, and into school we go. Well, all day I sat there waiting to get called into the principal's office. Mitch spent a lot of time down there anyway, so I knew he wasn't too worried. But never got called, went home, told my parents. They were pretty proud of us. And when I look back on it, I think they were probably ready to crack up, but had to hide that from us. So that was getting to school. Then we had to get home from school. Now this was one of Mitch's favorite stories. He used to love to tell this story. He could not get through it without cracking up. It would take forever. And Ari really liked this story. So we lived a mile from the school, which as little kids meant it took a half an hour to get home. But there was a shortcut that would shave off about 7 minutes. The only problem was there was a really big dog in that yard. Really big dog. Tippy. And Tippy would often break its lead and come after you. The odds of getting away from Tippy were not that good, and Mitch could have attested to that. But on this particular day, he really wanted to give it a try. So a lot of negotiating took place, and I'm sure you can imagine Mitch negotiating with me that we're going to take this shortcut. So we agreed that if Tippy came at me, Mitch would defend me. And we're walking through the yard, looking good, no Tippy. We're almost at the sidewalk when Tippy comes out of the dog door and just charges at us. I look for my brother, and he has vanished. I have no idea where he is. So I take my book bag and I swing it back and forth with all might. I must have hit the dog because he eventually retreated. And I still couldn't find my brother. And I'm calling for him, I'm looking all around. I found him in the bushes, hysterically laughing. So we continued to be close all the way through high school and college. I stayed in Philly, went to Drexel, and Mitch went to New Jersey, went to Princeton. I was in a co-op program, and I worked in New Jersey. So I would often drive down and have dinner with Mitch and his friends when he was at Princeton. On Mitch's 21st birthday, we decided to go out to a nice meal. My parents gave me $20 to put toward his meal. Not wanting to accidentally spend the $20, because I was also in college, I put it in his birthday card. When I gave it to him, I said, "This is from Mom and Dad, it's for dinner." Mitch didn't hear the "it's for dinner" part. So we go to this fancy dinner, it's time to pay. I pull a 20 out of my wallet, all the money I had, and I say to Mitch, "Give me the other 20. He says, "Oh." He had left it back in the dorm in the birthday card. So we couldn't pay for our dinner. Mitch says, "I'll just run back, I'll get it, I'll be back in 10 minutes. So an hour later, with my bladder about to burst, the waitress staring me down, Mitch returned. What happened was his roommates threw him a surprise party. And he couldn't convince them that he had actually left his sister behind in a restaurant. But he finally broke free, made it out, paid our bill, and off we went. My final story about Mitch is when he was in radiology residency and I was at the end of medical school. I was fortunate enough to do a rotation with him. One day I got to do an interventional procedure with him. We go in the room and Mitch introduces himself to the patient as Dr. Weiss. And he introduces me as 3/4 Dr. Weiss, explaining that I was still in medical school. The patient thought it was very funny. She had a great sense of humor, and she was awake for her procedure. So the jokes just flew during this whole procedure, and we had a great time. At the end of her procedure, she looked up and said, "When you first introduced yourselves, I thought you may have been husband and wife. But after all that banter, it's very clear you have to be brother and sister." She said, "This was the most enjoyable procedure I've ever had." I will never forget that day, never forget that patient. It was just so much fun working with my brother. And we were under the direction of his attending and mentor, Dr. Eric Stein. Dr. Stein sent me some very nice words about Mitch. I will read the closing paragraph. As I look back at all the residents I've helped train over the last 32 years in practice, and all the friends I have met along the way, there are very few people who have touched my life the way Mitch did. More than his intelligence and ability, I will cherish his many kindnesses to me and my family over the years. His caring, loving interactions with me, my family, and my friends and extended family in Clearwater are what I will miss most. My darling brother, my funny brother, my loving niece, my caring niece, her very talented and kind brother. I will always love and miss them. I've hoped you've enjoyed these stories. Thank you.
Jess Hackle, Bob and Marcy's daughter, niece and cousin, to those who we remember today.
A few days ago, I was pretty resolute on not reading any of the news articles, Facebook posts, or stories about Hannah, Ari, Uncle Mitch, and Aunt Leslie. I thought it'd be too heart-wrenching, but after sifting through some posts with my cousin Yaniv, I started to look at the comments people had left on Hannah and my Aunt Leslie's Facebook pages, and since the Loving the Weiss Family Facebook page. And once I started, I couldn't stop. I realized my family was everywhere, even in People magazine. My aunt loved to read People magazine. It was one of her main news sources. And it started to make me feel not exactly better, but ever so slightly happier. Happier to know that other people were talking about them, thinking of them, and most importantly, remembering them. And in light of those feelings, I'd like to share a few anecdotes and memories I have of each of them. Hannah. If there's one thing I've learned from Hannah, it is to care about something. Even when she was a toddler, she had her passions, and she made them known. Everyone knew she loved stickers, and we would spend hours looking through rolls of thousands of stickers that my mom would save for her whenever she, Ari, Uncle Mitch, and Aunt Leslie would visit from Florida. And then when she was a bit older, it was Hello Kitty, and then after that, it was shopping in my childhood bedroom, where she'd collect bar mitzvah party favors, and mood rings, and half-used colored pencils, and old stuffed animals. I know my Aunt Leslie loved hauling these treasures back to Florida. And then at some point, her passions became less material and more indicative of who she was. Someone who cared deeply about living a Jewish life and about environmental sustainability. I remember this year, Hannah, my parents, and my grandparents and I had to rush back to Hannah's dorm after a Sunday brunch so she could get the compost out before the truck came to pick it up. I even read one article last week that referred to Hannah as an activist, and I knew she would love that. But what she cared most about, besides her family and these passions, were her friends. Even I, as her older cousin, can name so many of her friends. I can tell you anecdotes about her friends, where they go to school, when, where, and how she met each one of them, when so-and-so first held hands with so-and-so at Disney World. My mom and my Aunt Leslie are about 6 years apart, and my cousin Hannah and I are also about 6 years apart. I know Hannah thought of me as a big sister. We shared a lot of sister moments, actually. She came over for dinner every Tuesday night when she was a baby, and when she put fistfuls of salmon and broccoli in her hair, I helped clean her off. She came to my 25th birthday dinner this year, and she even visited me in Boston during my senior year of college. I know she looked up to me a lot, maybe even went to Columbia and JTS to be close to me and my family. And now I will try to always look up to her and try to uphold her dedication to and zeal for my own Hannah passions. Uncle Mitch. I will always remember two specific moments with my Uncle Mitch. Last fall, when Hannah started college, all four Weisses came to New York to drop her off. I met them at their hotel room, and we decided to walk up Central Park West to dinner since my aunt refused to take the subway ever again after riding in the one subway car in the entire New York City subway system that did not have air conditioning. She really did become a Floridian. My Uncle Mitch and I had gotten ahead of the group, and we were walking, just the two of us, along Central Park. We came to the entrance of the John Lennon Memorial, and they made some offhanded joke about John Lennon. I didn't think much of it. I don't even remember what I said, and I wasn't trying to impress my Uncle Mitch. But, as many people have said, no one tells a joke like Uncle Mitch does. No one is as quick, as sharp-witted, as consistently funny as Uncle Mitch. And sure enough, my joke about John Lennon, or whatever it was, made him laugh. More than laugh, actually. Like double over crying on the streets of Manhattan. And I realized I'd cracked the code. For one moment, I felt so proud of myself. Like I was as clever, adroit, and funny as my Uncle Mitch, the person who could make anyone laugh. And I'll be the first to admit, his jokes didn't always land. They could be off or a little prickly, but to me, Uncle Mitch was the sweetest, a real softie. I was watching an old home movie this past week of my cousin Yaniv's 5th birthday party. Uncle Mitch and Aunt Leslie looked like they must have just gotten some time off from their residencies to spend their free time doing the hokey pokey with their nieces and nephews. I, however, had no interest in the hokey pokey. In this video, I'm shuffling around, pouting on the outer edges of the circle, and Uncle Mitch swoops in and lifts me up into his arms, and he's swinging me all around, hugging me, throwing my whole self in and my whole self out, and shaking me all about until I'm smiling and feeling good enough to dance on my own. Ari might have been the youngest cousin, but he was at the center of everything. He was a rallying point for everyone in the family. There are so many pictures of all my cousins and I holding him and kissing him as a baby, and as we got older, Ari reciprocated that love in his own way. If you were with Ari, sitting next to him at Passover Seder, or having him show you whatever Bill Nye YouTube video he was watching, or quizzing him on his times tables when he was hardly in elementary school, Ari made you feel special, like you were the person he cared about the most. I've never seen someone so young care so much about their family. What Ari and I really shared was a love of musical theater. Many people in our family love musicals, but Ari and I were the theater kids. We both loved Fiddler on the Roof, and 2 years ago, Ari, as Debbie mentioned, was Mottel the tailor in Fiddler on the Roof. The Weisses would usually send us a video of Ari's performances, but this video was something that he and his friends made at camp. A whole gaggle of kids were beatboxing around Ari as he sung Miracle of Miracles, Mottel the tailor's heroic ballad. Something about this video made me tear up. And while I do love that song, I loved watching Ari find his place at the center of another group of people who cared about him. I don't know if you can imagine, but I listen to the Fiddler soundtrack quite a lot. And whenever I listen to the song Miracle of Miracles, I think of Ari belting that song surrounded by people who love him. Aunt Leslie. When I think of Aunt Leslie, I will think of her voice. I will always think of her at Passover with my Aunt Debbie, leading each prayer, looking to her for reassurance that I was singing the songs correctly, and then if I wasn't, with as much zeal as she had. A few months ago, I helped her plan an evening for a family outing in Brooklyn, which ended at a karaoke club. At first, Aunt Leslie seemed a little skeptical of the place. It was completely desolate and might have been a defunct Polish banquet hall. But she trusted me. She knew that I wouldn't let her down. And the second Aunt Leslie took that microphone and the words appeared on the screen, she was hooked. That evening, she was the star. I will always remember her singing Fat Bottom Girls by Queen, sharing a microphone with Hannah, and just beaming. I will think about my Aunt Leslie's voice when she would call our house, every day, multiple times a day, just to talk to my mom. There was one time when my aunt called, and then 5 minutes later she called again, and my mom didn't pick up, and then 2 minutes later she called again, and my Aunt Leslie was frantic, and she was calling my mom saying, Mars, where are you? And my mom said, Les, I was in the bathroom. I remember her voice when we talk about our favorite NPR shows, like Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and Fresh Air. I know my aunt always thought that I'd love working on a show like Fresh Air, and interviewing people like Terry Gross does. Turns out, that's kind of what I do now. And when I found out I'd gotten a new job, she was one of the first people I wanted to tell. When my Aunt Leslie was little, she used to call my mom, Mommy number 2, because my mom seemed so much older. But in my life, my Mommy number 2 was my Aunt Leslie. At the end of every visit from Florida, when we'd hug goodbye, I always felt like we both knew that she was more than my aunt. We wouldn't say anything, we'd just hug, and we knew. I will miss the Weisses in so many ways. And though I can't speak for my whole family, I know sharing stories, recounting memories, and talking about them makes me feel happy because when I do, it feels like they're still part of my world, like they won't be forgotten. I hope others will help us remember them, not just today, but in a few weeks, months, and years from now. I know my parents, my sister, my grandparents, my uncle, my cousins, and I will carry them with us forever.